On the 3rd of February, Abigail Lawton was in the middle of a mental health crisis, and instead of getting the help she needed, Greater Manchester Police turned her house into their own personal Netflix and chill spot. 21-year-old Abby from Wigan went MIA in the midst of a mental health crisis when the ambulance service contacted police about her welfare. Police turned up to Abigail's address and, upon confirming she was not there, made themselves at home, kicking back on her sofa, putting their feet up, turning her TV on and checking what's trending on Netflix. Greater Manchester Police said that the police stayed at her home because it was unlocked and they remained in case she returned home, which, whilst I can appreciate the waiting for her to return and not leaving the house vulnerable, it doesn't answer the question of why they simply kicked back and enjoyed their own Netflix and chill sesh whilst Abigail was missing. Following an 11-hour search for Abigail, she was located in some woods where she was then arrested for wasting police time. I would think the plot at her home were wasting police time far more than someone in a mental health crisis. But that's just me. After Abigail returned home from the police station, she looked at her CCTV, where she claims she saw the police in her home mocking her. The 2 Greater Manchester police constables were seen on CCTV commenting on how she had watched the boy in the striped pyjamas. It's a good film, that, to be fair, but that's not exactly mocking somebody. Played about with her dumbbells, and that's not a euphemism, and at one point, whilst Abigail was on the phone to the sergeant, the 2 plod were informed of that, and one of them went up to the CCTV camera and said, "Hello Abigail, I know you're watching us." The footage from Abigail's home is now under investigation by Greater Manchester Police's professional standards, which, based on this and many other incidents, is something that police certainly don't have. It said that 3 police turned up to Abigail's home, a female sergeant and 2 male constables. The sergeant told them that they might as well chill in case she comes home. Abigail Lawton said when she left the address, the 2 male officers came in and turned on Netflix on my TV, making comments about what I had watched. They made comments that I'd watched The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, which I had previously, and other series I'd watched. They then said we could do with watching something like Come Dine With Me, before the other officer sees dogs behaving badly and starts to say how it's quite good. They then choose something on Netflix and start watching TV. One of the officers then gets my dumbbells and starts doing weights, which you can see in the footage, before sitting back down. Abigail had been alerted on her phone that there had been movement in her home, and she was rightly pissed that they had invaded her privacy while sitting around doing fuck all. She said the 2 officers found out I was speaking to the sergeant on the phone and made a comment that said she's happy to speak to the sergeant on the phone, but not happy to be found. I was in the woods, really struggling. I had overdosed before I left and was in a really bad mental health crisis. The officer had heard through the radio that I had been watching them through CCTV cameras because I told the sergeant I was not happy because they were in my home whilst I was not there and because they were sitting on my sofa watching TV. Then one officer goes up to the camera and says, "Hello Abigail, I know you're watching us." Then sits back on the sofa, which is again inappropriate. Abigail also claimed the police at her home carried out a data breach as they left their radios on loud so she could hear all the other crimes being reported in the area, including names of victims and criminals, ages and addresses. Now, to be fair, I don't necessarily think this would be deemed as a data breach as such. Being the control of her own CCTV, Abigail would, I imagine, also be bound by data protection rules. Therefore, anything she hears or sees would have to remain private anyway. Obviously a contentious issue whether civilians with CCTV should be accountable or not as a data controller. An investigation has since been launched by Greater Manchester Police's Professional Standards Department, who are looking into the officers who sat in her home for hours, as well as the female who initially told them to chill. Greater Manchester Police is also investigating the use of force by other officers as Ms Lawton was arrested and why she was taken to custody while suffering from a mental health crisis instead of a hospital. Abigail had been found in the woods around 4 a.m. by a male and female police constable. When she refused to get into the police car, she claims that the male officer put 2 hands on her and shoved her into the back of the police car. She said, "I was crying my eyes out as I was really distressed, and he said to me, 'I've got no sympathy for you crying. You've wasted my time by me looking for you for 5 hours. The sergeant had told her that she would be taken to hospital, but instead she was taken to custody, where she is said to have spent the next 12 hours. She said that during the interview, the female police constable belittled her and asked her how she would feel if there were no police available for emergencies because they were all out looking for her. Of course, considering that there were 2 sitting on their asses watching Netflix at the time, I wouldn't say that they were actually that busy. Abigail said, obviously that comment distressed me, as I didn't mean to waste police time or cause distress, and obviously I was in a mental health crisis. She claims that a mental health nurse who visited her during her crisis told her to make a formal complaint, adding that she should have been taken to the hospital and not the police station. Greater Manchester Police are now investigating the general level of service from the constables with regards to them watching television and using her gym equipment. And they're also investigating allegations of unprofessional attitude and disrespect, use of force, power to arrest and detain, as well as impolite language and tone. Abigail added, I am ashamed of the police officers. Being wrongly arrested, it causes trauma, and going into custody is horrible. Being in a cell, you can't do anything. You have no privacy because they are watching you on cameras. They watch you go to the toilet. That itself has made me lose trust in the police because I assume they are going to arrest me again when I've done nothing wrong. I'm disappointed and ashamed by the officers sitting watching TV, the comments that they made and how they acted at my property. I've not given them consent to be in my house or watch TV or use my gym equipment. Abigail added, it was as though they were mocking me and taking the mick while I was out in the woods in a crisis. The weather that day was awful, raining and cold. I was clearly having a mental health crisis and they were just sat here watching TV as if to say, fuck it, we don't care if she's missing. Now, at the time of writing this, Greater Manchester Police had been contacted for comment, but I've as yet been unable to find any response.